you're good. All right, so I'm excited to be here today with Carla Patullo. So Carla is a Grammy-winning artist. She wrote an album called So She Howls, which is inspired by a near-death experience and features collaborations with the Scorchio Quartet, violinist Lily Hayden, among many others. And it sounds like she's done some really incredible work with shining a light, on different causes and promoting inclusion for women, immigrants, and LGBTQ plus community. And today I was really excited to be able to connect with her on the podcast, to be able to share just a little bit about her story and her journey. And I think for all of us as independent artists, whenever we have the opportunity to basically see someone who has been able to do something like what you've done, Carla, and winning a Grammy is I think for a lot of people who are in this audience, it's a big goal for them. So thank you for taking time to be here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really fun to sit down and chat with fellow musicians in the community. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
100%. So to start with, maybe you could share a little bit about your background and kind of how did you go from starting out with music to eventually being able to win a Grammy?
Well, let me tell you this, everything, I feel like a lot of the good things that have happened in my career were like so unexpected and like not planned. Like it just happened like that. But, to say you got to put all the hard work behind it, right? And I started out, I when I first started playing and got attracted to music, I just always wanted to compose more than learn how to play the piano, learn how to play the guitar. I just had like these ideas like in my head from a very young age. And so I started middle school. I started putting little EPs together. But yeah, coming from a family that's immigrated from Italy, my parents were like, you have to go to college. We don't care where or what you study, but you have to be like the first one in our family to go to college. So I was like, fine, I want to go to Berklee College of Music. And being in the state, living in the state of Massachusetts, that kind of made that possible. I'm originally from Springfield, Mass. And so studying music I was studying songwriting, which is a fun major. I don't know what that major necessarily brought on paper, but it did bring me a lot of just experience, even just like collaborating with people, and did that and formed a band and went to New York. And I've been kind of nomadic in a way, I think, as a lot of musicians are, but then headed out to Austin, Texas, and began working with Sandra Bernhard, who's a comedian, musician, and went on tour with her. And that's when I started to get into film scoring, which led me all the way here to LA, which is a bulk of the work that I do, whether it's songs for TV, but also composing the score. And then of course there's my solo work, which I've kind of been on the back burner. Like I was focusing so much on film scores, like the solo work just kind of came out of this like crazy personal experience in my life. So, yeah, hope that summarizes it all. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm curious, as someone who has sort of stumbled their way through, and like you described, like luck is where opportunity meets preparedness. And at the same time, we have to appreciate the fact that like some things just sort of happen like out of, you wouldn't have expected them. And that's where the greatest blessings can come from.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like what some of the biggest challenges were that you struggled with when you were first getting started with your music.
Well, I think it's just financially being able to stay afloat, and also your boundaries of like when you are working in film scoring, your boundaries get messed with a lot because there's crazy deadlines and stuff like that. So I think and through what this album also taught me was like just kind of to respect myself and my body, and that will feed into my creativity. So I think like just kind of managing, what you can, but not selling yourself too short either, because you won't have the energy to keep going and be sustainable.
Learning how to set boundaries, especially in an industry where the deadlines are so urgent and so fierce. Definitely sounds like that's been an important lesson to learn. So I know that part of your story is about a near-death experience, if I read that correctly. Could you share a little bit of details about
Sure.
that?
because it kind of feeds into what we're talking about, because that's kind of what taught me to respect myself and my boundaries and my body. When I began writing So She Howls, I had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was a very therapeutic album for me. Like, it was the first time I wrote an album that I didn't have any plan for it. I didn't even know it was going to be an album. It was literally like, I need to do something to get out of bed in the morning and motivate myself to fight and to get through this experience. And so, yeah, like, I mean, thinking that the fact that it would go on to get a Grammy is just still, I'm still like, what happened? Is this a beautiful dream? Like, just totally unexpected. And I think maybe it's because it really came from this moment that it was just a necessity. The music was just this thing I needed. It was very fundamental to, like, when we all began probably writing music in our lives, where we just loved it so much and we weren't thinking about our bills and we weren't thinking about deadlines. We were just had this pure joy for it. And as horrible as an experience it was going through breast cancer, it allowed me to get into this fundamental place with music again. And that was a really incredible experience. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm sorry they had to go through that experience. I can imagine that it must have been incredibly challenging. And also it's an interesting reminder of just how sometimes those challenges can become a blessing and they can help teach us things. And so having been through that experience, it sounds like part of what you mentioned with setting boundaries and learning how to respect yourself and respect your body was something that came out of it. Could you share a little bit more details about how that came up for you?
Yeah. Well, I think like I've like BC before breast cancer, it was like this thing where when I would work, I would spend countless hours like sitting in a chair for like the whole 16 hours or whatever. And I kind of would pride myself on that. Like, oh, like, because we're working and we're hustling to be composer and to whatever. And I think that mentality, I personally found it to be wrong in the end. I think I'm actually much more efficient and a better composer when I think about the food I'm eating, the walking I'm getting, if I give my body and my mind space to live. I mean, it sounds pretty like it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's only like what every scientific study has been telling us for like a long time. But yeah, sometimes best practice doesn't best. Sometimes it's hard to actually apply the lessons that we know that we should be doing.
Yeah, and you're asking your body, like you're asking yourself for this energy to make this music, and it's like, well, you got to feed yourself. You got to like, and I had to do this because I was sick. So I think it would have been really hard to do that. But I noticed myself now, even it's like, I don't start working. I don't start doing things until I go out for my like 2-3 mile walk in the morning, come back. I make sure I get all the things my body needs. I take time to prepare my food. I know I sound super nerdy, but
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
No, but it's like, but I'll tell you, I'm not less efficient. I feel like I'm more creative. I feel better. When I sit down to write, I'm quicker. I just feel ready to go. And yeah.
It is powerful. I mean, what that reminds me of is I think it was Abraham Lincoln who described like the sharpening the saw concept. And it sounds like what you're saying is similar to that analogy. A lot of us feel like, especially in today's like culture that prides itself on like hustle culture and working really hard and overworking, that there can be a tendency to like, if the analogy is like cutting down the tree, it's like to spend every day, every hour trying to cut down the tree with a saw. But what you're saying is that if you actually take care of yourself and you don't just spend all of your time cutting down the tree, but you actually take breaks and you actually sharpen the saw, then you're not less productive because you're not spending more time cutting. You're actually more productive because you have a sharp saw, so it's able to cut faster.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. And I think like I grew up in the restaurant business. So for me, like that hustle and that like being like so busy that you can't, like you're on edge the whole time is like this was for me, this like signature of, oh, I'm a hard worker. And so I've had to really shift that mentality.
Mm.
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 Yeah.
That's super helpful. Yeah, I mean, and again, it does seem like it's part of like the culture right now is like there is sort of like a hustle, mentality.
Yeah.
So, could you share a few extra examples of like ways that you've learned how to take care of yourself and your body and kind of get in a good space so that you're able to be more
Yeah.
productive?
I think like one thing is I like to, in the morning, I like to wake up and do my walks, but also have music with me that I just really love and give myself the space to enjoy
Mm.
the music elements
Mm.
that I love. Be a little like creative with yourself. Like, don't think about your work just yet. Get in the space of like, yeah, this is what inspires me. Like, this is fantastic. I love this song, and sit in it. Just do like a 20-minute walk and take that in. And I think that's like just one way. I think also if I'm doing a lot of the film scoring stuff and I don't have time to necessarily focus on my album that day, I still give myself 20 minutes to just explore that space and just to connect with it. Even if it's brief, I think just connecting with it, I think that helps me grow with this concept that I'm working on, even if I'm not working on it for 8 hours or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Super smart. Yeah, that reminds me of a book, I think it was called The Spark, that was all about the benefits of walking and running. And they found like a huge impact in just the brain activity and the test results when they had people go for like a 20-minute walk versus someone who was just sitting down. And it definitely seems like there's some magic in that, just like going for a walk regularly throughout your day.
Yeah, I think being composers and musicians, we sit down a lot and our bodies want to move. And I think it's like a synergy that happens when your body's moving and then like the creativity starting to wake up and starting to move. And I think that's a good way to like put a little fuel in your tank.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know that there's a lot of very smart people too who were, I was going to say prudent, but that's not the correct word. They're ardent. That's another word I don't use very often, but they were ardent walkers. So they would go for walks.
Yeah.
Like Albert Einstein was an example of someone who
Yeah.
apparently just like went for tons of walks throughout. There's also big pockets of what they call blue zones where people's health and lifespans are like way above average. And one of the main differentiators that they would go for walks throughout the day. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm one of those people in LA who like walks. I have like, me and my partner have one car, but like, of course, we cannot live here without a car, but we've make paths to where we can walk to. And it is, I think something, the hard thing is that when you are so busy and like, even for people who have kids and like, you're so busy and you're just finding that moment to get into the studio, it's hard. So I would just, you recommend even just 5 minutes, start off with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And that's another point that you had brought up with the creativity and kind of setting aside some space to work on what brings you to life. And even if it's not 8 hours, setting aside 5 to 20 minutes to do it doesn't necessarily have to be like you set aside a huge chunk, but just that little bite seems like a great way to generate momentum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear some more insights in terms of maybe you could share your journey of creating your album and what that journey was like. And you mentioned that you didn't necessarily expect like going into it that it was going to win a Grammy award. Curious to hear a little bit more about that journey and what that looked like for you.
Yeah. So it really was like kind of like this diary of things and of what I was going through. And it's very much like in motion. It's like following the motion of my road to healing, really. So, but I think like what I usually do for recording an album was thrown out the window. And in this case, I just started singing and humming and howling. That's how I came up with the album title. But, at first I would just be in my phone, just kind of like had these ideas coming out, but really didn't have the motivation to get up and make an album or to record or whatever. And when I was going through treatment, like some may know with cancer, at first you really don't know anything, like what type of cancer you have, what's happening and all that. And you're in this unknown. And that's kind of where I was in this frozen state where I couldn't really do anything. But as I started my treatment and my medicine started working, I was getting that energy. And so I was able to step by step get up and like, okay, well, maybe I'll just put a microphone and just record on my laptop and just something very simple. And that's where it really started, because I would just record these vocals and they would just be live of like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. And that ended up becoming the fundamental part of some of these compositions. I kept all these vocals. They were very raw. Like I probably, like, the editor and me would have went in and like, oh, let me tweak that and tweak that. But I like did not do that. I wanted to preserve that energy. I didn't go record anything. And I think that was important. I think that kind of led the way of like, this album's going to be, it's going to be like an archive thing, like of what I went through. It's going to be like almost like the way you would treat a documentary, right? It's like, we're recording this time and space in my life. And so I tried to honor that along the way. And then as I started getting better, I started reaching out to some musicians to come on and give me a bit of their wings. So I hope that people get that feeling of that magic when you perform with you have collaborators join you and kind of lift you up, and that translates to the friends or the family you have in your life that lifts you up when you're down. So it just kind of all unfolded in this way that was just really resonating with me personally, and how I was feeling emotionally. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely interesting hearing you share that story. And it sounds like you have some direct experience about different modalities, different ways of recording, and how that experience was very authentic, very raw. It came from this place. So it was really like very emotional. And versus maybe some other kinds of styles of music might be a little bit more like intentional or more focused on writing for sync or TV. So I feel like it's an interesting lesson in sort of the power of authenticity and the power of writing music that lights something up in you.
Yeah. And there are, I think, like, too, before COVID, I began my breast cancer journey during COVID. But before that, I had this idea too, like, I think there's space for these live tattoo projects to come out where we're just performing again in front of 2 stereo mics or whatever. We're all playing together. I had been listening to some music like that, and it's like, this is so refreshing just to have like these live raw performances. And anyways, but these imperfections, I think that's something else with this album. It's like embracing those imperfections and like don't tune everything, don't love things that are slightly out of tune, because that's human. As we're dealing with these non-human elements, I think we need to embrace this.
Super interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really encouraging message, because all of us are human and we're not perfect, and who we are is something that has different, it's not black or white. And so being able to actually embrace that and share that seems like a powerful lesson. I don't know, nowadays in the age of AI, as things are evolving so quickly, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on AI in music.
Yeah, like these like non-human elements make, I think, that emotion, what it translates to is an emotion for the listener to feel vulnerable. Because it's like when you hear something that's just not perfect, I think, like, for example, there's a song I play on this album live called We Remember, and it chokes me up every time I sing it. And I choke up on stage every time. And I feel like after the show, people come up to me and they're like, We Remember made me cry. And I'm like, well, it made me. But that vulnerability, I think, translates. I think, like, I don't know, I think there's something special in that. And I think we should just own it. And yeah. carry
Thank
that
you.
forward. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. There's a song that I wrote recently for my daughter Willow called "Hello Willow," and
Oh.
that's one I can't play it without getting emotional and crying through it. So
Yeah.
hearing
Yeah.
you share that is inspiring for me to give myself permission to to share that
Yeah.
and be okay with it. Mm,
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah.
mm. All right. Well, you know what? We've got an amazing crew of musicians who are here in the audience.
Awesome.
And I'd be curious to hear if anyone here has any questions for Carla. If so, feel free to raise your hand, come on here live. Or if you want to put something in the chat, that works as well. Looking here in the chat, I see Joe says, I'm a walker too. Walkers, it's a movement. My last name is Walker. Walking is good. Yeah, aside from the name. Daniel, so it looks like I'm catching up on some older messages around when you're talking about recovery and rest and treating your body with respect. Daniel mentioned spontaneous napping and face nuzzling with my dogs throughout the day recharges my sense of peace.
Oh
Multiple
my
times throughout the
God.
day, I stop what I'm doing and soak up their wisdom. Also going
Yeah.
outside and stretching in the sunlight. Good
That's
stuff.
great. Yeah.
I also see some inspiring messages here. Joe says, cancer has ravaged the lives of so many people in my life. I feel you, Carla. Rock
Thank you.
on. Mm,
Right on.
mm. Cool. Well, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to come on stage and connect here personally? If so, feel free to raise your hand, come on here live. Otherwise, maybe people are feeling a little bit shy, so we can come back to it afterwards as well. But I mean, maybe here's a question for you, Carla. This is one of my favorite questions to ask: is if you could go back in time and you could go to your biggest point of need in your music journey, when maybe you was at your rock bottom or your darkest, most challenging point, if you could go back to that point and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I think back when I first started touring,
Mm,
those were some rocky times. I think I really got out of this healthy boundary with my body. I think that was a real time period where, I just pushed myself so hard to the point of almost like destruction and like not wanting to do music. There's
mm,
like I would say like just that unsustainable mentality I had back then. I wish I could have told myself to balance my energy out and not think it's the end all be all. Like getting on the road was important to my growth, but I think pushing it to the point where I pushed it, where we were just try to find places to sleep and all that stuff that is kind of toxic,
mm,
and just
mm,
not putting so much pressure on myself, I think.
mm.
I know I'm
That's
like telling
powerful.
everybody the opposite of like I don't want anyone to think like I don't think you should work hard, but
Work hard
but
is good, but working smart
yeah, working
and take
smart.
care of yourself is. I mean, because if you don't do that, like who cares how successful you are on paper? Like if you're not
Yeah,
fulfilled or happy or healthy, then it doesn't seem like that any of the other stuff really even makes a difference.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
Yeah,
cool. I can definitely relate with you early on. So I toured for about 10 years before I started Modern Musician. And I remember the first year we like hustled real hard and we were sleeping in our van, Walmart
yeah,
parking lots, peanut butter tortillas for breakfast, lunch, and
yep.
dinner. So I'm curious, any advice or recommendations you would have for the modern musician, like an independent musician who
Yeah,
maybe they're interested in, maybe part of their goal is like long term they'd like to win a Grammy, or maybe it's
yeah,
not a Grammy, maybe it's like they just want to know that their music is actually making a difference and positively impacting the lives of other people. What would be some piece of advice for the modern musician?
well, I think like first of all, I would start off by saying that we are in a great indie place. I think we could achieve a lot without. I think for years I wanted a label, I wanted this or that, and I think there's this great space for us to really be able to hold on to who we are as artists, but also use the tools out there that the labels use. It's a little bit, I feel, more of a playing field. I mean, of course, they have a lot more money than us,
Mm,
but I think like there is a hustle of like being able to communicate and reach people online. And that's cool. Like we haven't, that's this thing that I would say when I first started out that wasn't there. And I think that allows us to be authentic with ourselves more than trying to fit this like this what this trend is right now, or what that is, what like who we should be according to what labels want us to be. I think it gives us this artistic freedom. I think that being said, there's also like we're not making album on sales really. You know what I mean? Like we're just Spotify and all the way that everything's set up. It's not really, it's hard to be sustainable with some of these. So I think we just have to try to find creative ways of connecting and performing and holding on to who we are and holding on to. There was an interview I heard recently with Bonnie Raitt, who I was so inspired by. It was on this podcast called Wiser Than Me, which is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But anyways, she was reflecting on her life, and she kind of went into this whole thing that she's independent these years, and she got away from the labels, and she puts on her business hat, she puts on her artist hat, and she does a lot of business work. And I think accepting that and being able to wear both hats is something that we should really get good at. I'm still always going to be working on getting better with the business part. I think it's tricky and just trying to navigate that. But I think but the fact that we can do it, the fact that I, as an indie artist, can hustle to get my music heard and to get a Grammy from that, I think that I'm just saying it's possible. It's you don't need that person to come in and take you there.
So awesome. So encouraging to hear you say that too. Like what you just shared was like the heart and the mission and the ethos of Modern Musician and everything that, that we focus on here. So it's great to hear that reflected as well.
Yeah.
How about, I mean, here's something that I'd be curious to hear your perspective on. As someone who's had this musical experience where you're able to share and use your music as almost like a form of therapy, for someone who's listening to this right now, who's an indie artist, who has ambitions to build a successful career, how can they tap into that authentic source of creativity? And how can they maybe write music from that place, as opposed to what you described as like trying to be someone or trying to be what other people think? You have any ideas or prompts or ways that people can maybe get in touch with that for themselves?
Yeah, it's the first track on the album, for example. I'll just start with that because it's called If You Listen. And I think it's about listening to yourself and really listening to what's around you and taking that with you. I know it's like I was pushed into this because of my illness, this is it, Carla. Like I had to listen, right? But I think just that connection of like listen with your environment, like where you are, like let that be a part of your sound. Let the people around you be a part of your sound. And sometimes it's like more like listen to yourself more than trying to have that urge to listen to another artist that you love. I mean, sometimes like some of my favorite artists, like I love listening to her music, but I kind of limit myself doing that because I just want to take time to like explore really different things and give myself a little bit. I mean, I think maybe that could be a starting point too. I think like just listening to really stuff that is completely not you, and when just like maybe an element of that can become yours, and you can listen to that and like transform that into that is you, how that relates to you, and just expose yourself to these different things. Yeah. I think that helps, but yeah.
Super helpful. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you can start with just being present and listening and being aware of what's happening inside of you. And part of the hustle kind of culture is maybe trying to be somewhere else or trying to achieve something or do something or busy. But if you actually give yourself space, like you described, to actually just sit with who you are and to listen to actually what's happening, then that can be where that place of authenticity can come from.
Yeah. And just to add like another fun little thing, it's like the same as like learning a new instrument. Like when you're kind of in this unknown and vulnerable place where you're like figuring out yourself. So I like to do that. I like to like pick up an instrument that I don't know. And sometimes like I'll just play notes, not knowing where I'm going, and I'll come up with a cool progression. And there's something about that that's like, it's fun, but it kind of wakes up those senses of like listen, like let's listen to what I'm doing here. It makes you kind of more alert, I think.
Yeah, it's like a lot more playful or like curious. You're kind of seeing what happens. Super interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of folks who raised their hands in the audience. So,
Okay.
Mr. Joe Eddy, let's bring you on stage. Hey, Joe. How are you doing today?
Hey, Michael. Hey, Carla.
Hey, Joe.
Can you see me?
We can hear you. Yeah, so we won't be able to see you on the riverside here, Joe, but we can hear you.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for being here, Carla. Congrats on the
thank you.
Grammy and the successful work of art and beating cancer.
Thank you.
Cancer has played a big role in my life with my wife and children, and it's crazy. So the battle.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious on now that you've found some success with your art and it's been validated with a Grammy and you have things on track, what's your daily life like now? What are you working on now creatively, and what are some of your ambitions and goals now that you've kind of reached this level that a lot of us what's next? What does the horizon become now?
Well, it's
Thanks,
funny.
Joe.
Yeah, that's a great question because like I think I'm still doing the things I love, so like that hasn't changed, right? Like it's maybe there's a little bit more of an opportunity of like more people might listen to it right now, or I don't know, like maybe there I will say in the film scoring part, I've gotten some gigs out of it, thankfully. So that's those always keep the lights on, and like and it's cool because I feel like now, like with the film scoring part, people are starting to say, oh, we want to come to you for your sound. We want to come for that thing that you do. And so I really love that. I think a door that's open for me is kind of music therapy. Just the idea of incorporating some of those techniques into music and really kind of writing music that incorporates like these elements of, I mean, it's pretty, I just feel like I've opened the door to music therapy and like started researching things like binaural beats, and I included some of that on the album, but I think there's so much more, and I love to learn. So I'm excited to really dive into that. Yeah.
Super cool. I'm excited to hear what comes from that.
New album.
Yeah. Joe also put in the chat, all caps, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we probably have time for maybe one more question here. And I see the one and only Daniel Cartier's got his hand up. So let's bring Daniel on stage. Hey, Daniel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for coming and sharing. This has been a really awesome, this has probably been one of my really amazing podcasts today. And I really like that you shared about picking up different instruments and just kind of like going, like just allowing yourself to unlock different parts of your mind that you wouldn't normally. And I write a lot. I'm a member of some of these kind of, I don't know if they're cheesy or not, but like a member of these like communities where they let you know, hey, like this TV show's looking for this. And so they need like this. And so then everybody like scrambles around. It's kind of like a cattle call, but like,
Right.
I still think like being part of those things can force you to just start. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, I guess, a little bit, like putting yourself in situations where you're kind of forced to like, even if it's a long shot, like a great example is like they were looking for creepy circus music. and like specifically like calliopes and stuff like that. And I'm literally covered in tattoos. Like I look like the tattooed man from the carnival. And so I just started, I kind of became mildly obsessed with like recording, like I couldn't stop like every public domain song like I wanted to record, and then like making up. But then the weird thing is like it got me really, it's weird how like different types of music will remind us of other types of music. And so then I found myself listening to show tunes because it was reminding me of show tunes because it was theatrical. And then I was like listening to stuff like the Cabaret soundtrack and stuff. And then I started writing songs that were like real, like more like singer-songwriter songs that had nothing to do with the challenge at all. But like, yeah, so I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on like these type of like putting yourself in situations where you'll kind of be forced to, and you've probably had a lot of experience just through working the whole soundtrack arena as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I still put together reels and like for projects, so it's a tricky balance between that and your solo artist work. First of all, I just want to say that, but you know, I think like all these projects, you're like a sponge, and I think you're doing everything right. Like you're like absorbing all these sounds and you're honing them into yourself. You're making them your own. Like you're taking it in and you're going to process that and create something beautiful that's yours. And I think that's great. I also think for me, doing some of these things where, you know, putting together demos or writing demos for a project that I want to get, there's always something great that can come out of that. Whether I learn a new tool, my production gets better. I think everything I do can get like a lot better. Just you got to keep going till the day you die. Like you just got to get better, right? And I think that's just you get better and as you go. And I think these experiences of making these demos, or even if it's just the experience of, even if you didn't write the demo and you took that time to take all this in, that's fantastic. And then of course, like you think business wise, with all these demos, you're getting better. And you can also maybe put those demos in a library somewhere and they can make a little bit of money or whatever. And it's all great what you're doing. I think, yeah, keep that. It's great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's
I hope I answered your question. I don't know. I kind of just went off on it, but
yeah, no, I think it sounded like the question was mainly in terms of like that specific strategy of like of writing songs in response to synced projects. Like, is that helpful, or is there better ways to spend the time? And it sounds like what you're saying is like, no, like that could be a great way to generate some ideas and brainstorm. Cool. Well, Carla, thank you again so much for taking the time to be here with us today and to share, your journey and share, some of the lessons that you learned.
Thank you.
Yeah, I try to remember the fact that we're living on borrowed time here, that life is very precious, and it's easy to forget that. So whenever I can have a conversation with someone like yourself that has been able to work through that and be able to share that lesson, I think it's incredibly inspiring. And thank you for, I'm sure, like the courageousness that was required to sort of put that into your music and then like to share it and to put it out. Yeah, I'm sure that pushed you in a lot of ways. So thank you for doing that. And for anyone that's here right now who's like, okay, cool. Like I've heard all about the album now. I'd love to go check it out and listen to it because it sounds awesome. What's the name of the album? Where they can go? Where's the best place for them to go check it out?
Yeah, the album's called So She Howls, and you could really go. It's on all of the platforms. I will say on Apple you can listen to it. It was done with immersive. It was like an immersive mix. So you can listen to it a little bit more in depth there. I had a fantastic mixer, Daniel Cresco, mix it. So yeah,
that's it. I know the first album I'm going to listen to on my Apple Vision Pro is going to be So She Howls. Actually, though, I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be the first album I listen. It's probably the AirPods, I think, are the things that are going to do like the 3D sound kind of thing.
Yeah, the AirPods, actually, this is why I got these AirPods, was to listen to my own album when it was getting mixed on that platform. Yeah, so.
Very cool. All right. Well, like always, we're going to put all the links in the show notes for easy access. And let's give a virtual round of applause for Carla.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Yeah!
Thank you.